V2 latest copy publish. Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy World channel. Tonight, we're traveling back through time to walk the marble streets of an empire that shaped the world we live in today, the Roman Empire. For over 1,000 years, from a small city on the banks of the Tiber River to an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria, Rome left its mark on everything. Our languages, our laws, our architecture, even the months we use to measure time, all carry echoes of Rome. The roads they built still lie beneath modern highways. The aqueducts they engineered still inspire wonder. And the stories they told of emperors and gladiators, of conquest and fall, still capture our imagination 2,000 years later. But Rome wasn't just grand monuments and legendary battles. It was also daily life, the smell of bread baking in neighborhood ovens, the sound of merchants calling out their wares, the sight of children playing in the streets while their parents worked, worried, laughed, and lived lives not so different from our own. They were people trying to make sense of their world, building something they hoped would last forever, never quite believing it could end. Tonight, we'll explore 100 quiet truths about Roman life, from the rise of a republic to the fall of an empire, from the heights of power to the small details of everyday existence. Some facts will surprise you. Others might feel familiar, reminding you that across the centuries, humans remain remarkably human. If these calm explorations into history help you unwind, consider liking and subscribing, or sharing your thoughts in the comments below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, let your breathing slow. Let the modern world fade away, and let's step back into the ancient streets of Rome. Rome began as a small village of mud huts. Long before marble temples and grand forums, Rome was just a collection of simple dwellings on 7 hills beside the Tiber River. According to legend, it was founded in 753 BC by Romulus, who killed his twin brother Remus in a dispute over where to build. Whether the story is true or not, archaeological evidence shows that early Rome was indeed a modest settlement, its people farming and raising livestock, living in round huts with thatched roofs. These early Romans could never have imagined that their small village would one day command an empire stretching across 3 continents. But from these humble beginnings, something remarkable grew. A city that would become the center of the known world, built stone by stone, generation by generation, each adding to what came before until Rome became eternal. The Roman Republic lasted nearly 500 years before becoming an empire. Rome wasn't always ruled by emperors. For almost 5 centuries, it was a republic governed by elected officials and a senate made up of wealthy citizens. This system emerged around 509 BC when the Romans overthrew their last king and vowed never to be ruled by one man again. The Republic gave Rome its identity, SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and people of Rome. Citizens could vote, hold office, and debate in the forum. But the system had flaws. Power struggles, class conflicts, and eventually civil wars tore at the Republic's fabric. By the time Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BC, the Republic was already dying. His adopted son, Octavian, would finish what Caesar started, becoming Augustus, the first emperor, in 27 BC. The Republic's ideals never quite died, though. They echoed through history, inspiring later revolutions and democracies, including the one you might live in today. Romans had a complex system of social classes. Roman society was carefully stratified into distinct groups. At the top were the patricians, aristocratic families who claimed descent from Rome's founders. Below them were the plebeians, the common citizens, who made up most of the population. Then came the freedmen, former slaves who had gained their liberty, and finally the slaves themselves, who had no rights at all. These divisions affected everything: where you could sit at the theater, what you could wear, whom you could marry, and what political offices you could hold. Patricians dominated early Roman politics, but over centuries, plebeians fought for and won more rights, including their own representatives called tribunes. Yet even as legal barriers fell, social distinctions remained. Romans were always conscious of rank and status, of who stood where in the social order. Your class wasn't just about wealth, it was about family, history, and your place in Rome's grand story. They built over 250,000 miles of roads across their empire. The Romans were master road builders, creating a network that connected every corner of their vast empire. These weren't simple dirt paths, but engineered marvels, built in layers with drainage systems, stone foundations, and paved surfaces. The most famous, the Appian Way, was called Queen of Roads and ran from Rome to the southern ports. Roads allowed armies to march quickly to trouble spots, merchants to trade goods across continents, and messages to travel at speeds that wouldn't be matched until the invention of the telegraph. Many Roman roads still exist today, buried under modern highways or visible as ancient stone paths in remote areas. When you hear the phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," it wasn't metaphor. Rome truly was the hub of a vast network that physically connected the known world, a feat of engineering that helped hold an empire together for centuries. Roman soldiers could march 20 miles a day, carrying 60 pounds of equipment. The Roman legionary was one of history's most effective fighting machines, but success came through discipline and endurance, not just courage. Each soldier carried weapons, armor, tools for building camps, cooking equipment, and several days' worth of food, about 60 pounds total. Despite this load, legions regularly marched 20 Roman miles, about 18.4 modern miles per day, day after day, across mountains, deserts, and forests. They built fortified camps every night, complete with ditches and walls, then dismantled them each morning to march again. This combination of mobility and engineering gave Rome a massive military advantage. By the time most armies even learned an enemy was approaching, Roman legions had already arrived, fortified their position, and prepared for battle. The empire was built not just through conquest, but through the ability to project power anywhere, sustained by thousands of soldiers willing to march into the unknown. They invented concrete that has lasted over 2,000 years. Roman concrete was so well made that structures built with it still stand today, while many modern buildings crumble within decades. The secret was their mixture: volcanic ash called pozzolana, lime, and seawater combined with volcanic rocks. This created a chemical reaction that made the concrete actually strengthen over time, especially in seawater. The Pantheon's massive dome, built in 125 AD, remains the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome, still intact after nearly 2 millennia. For centuries after Rome fell, the recipe was lost, and medieval builders couldn't match Roman engineering. Only recently have scientists begun to understand what made Roman concrete so special. In a world where modern infrastructure constantly needs repair, These ancient structures stand as silent testament to Roman engineering genius, harbors, aqueducts, and buildings that have outlasted the empire itself. Wealthy Romans had central heating in their homes. Romans invented a heating system called the hypocaust, where hot air from a furnace flowed through spaces beneath floors and inside walls. Wealthy homes and public baths had these systems, keeping rooms warm even in winter. Floors were supported by small pillars, creating a gap for hot air circulation, and hollow tiles in walls let warmth rise through multiple stories. Slaves would tend the furnaces, feeding them with wood or charcoal to maintain consistent temperatures. This was luxury living. Most Romans couldn't afford such systems, but it shows how sophisticated Roman engineering could be. They didn't just accept cold winters, they engineered solutions, applying the same principles they used in public baths to private homes. Walking into a Roman villa in winter, you'd feel warmth rising from the floor itself, a comfort that most of the world wouldn't experience again until central heating's reinvention nearly 2,000 years later. The Colosseum could be filled with water for mock naval battles. The Colosseum wasn't just for gladiator fights. On special occasions, the arena floor could be flooded to create a shallow lake for naumachii, staged naval battles with real ships and combatants. These spectacles required enormous effort, moving ships into the arena, training fighters, and managing the water without flooding the underground chambers where animals and gladiators waited. Later renovations added permanent underground structures that made flooding impossible, so we know these water battles happened only in the Colosseum's early years. But imagine sitting in the stands, watching warships glide across water where yesterday gladiators fought, the splash of oars mixing with the roar of the crowd. These spectacles showed Rome's wealth and engineering prowess while entertaining tens of thousands. Nothing was too extravagant, too difficult, or too expensive when it came to public entertainment. The games weren't just shows, they were demonstrations of Roman power and ingenuity. Romans brushed their teeth with urine. Roman dental hygiene might shock modern sensibilities, but it had a scientific basis. They used urine, particularly from Portugal, considered the strongest, as mouthwash and tooth whitener. Urine contains ammonia, which actually does have cleaning properties and can whiten teeth. It was collected in public urinals, aged to increase ammonia concentration, then sold for various purposes, including laundering and dental care. The poet Catullus mocked a rival for having gleaming white teeth from excessive urine use. While we might find it revolting, Romans were practical. They used what worked. They also brushed with pastes made from powdered bone, crushed oyster shells, and charcoal. For all their sophistication, Romans understood that presentation mattered, that a bright smile conveyed health and status. They do whatever it took to maintain appearances, even if it meant using something we'd never consider putting near our mouths. Gladiators were celebrities who endorsed products. While many gladiators were slaves or criminals forced to fight, successful ones became famous, their names known throughout the empire. They had fan clubs, inspired graffiti on walls, much of which archaeologists have found preserved in Pompeii. And yes, they endorsed products. Their images appeared on oil lamps, their names on pottery, and they were paid to promote everything from wine to weapons. Women swooned over famous gladiators, and their sweat was collected and sold as an aphrodisiac. Freemen sometimes voluntarily became gladiators, drawn by fame and fortune despite the obvious risks. The very best could win their freedom and retire wealthy. Like modern athletes, they were both admired and exploited, their violent profession entertaining millions while making fortunes for the promoters who owned them. The parallel to modern sports is striking. Same celebrity, same commercial exploitation, just a much deadlier game. Romans built aqueducts that transported water over 50 miles. Roman cities needed enormous amounts of water for drinking, bathing, fountains, and sewers. To supply it, they built aqueducts, engineering marvels that carried water from distant sources through channels that maintained a steady, gentle downward slope. Some sections ran underground, others on massive arched bridges crossing valleys. The Aqua Marcia brought water to Rome from 56 miles away, while the Pont de Garde in France still stands, a three-tiered bridge 160 feet high. Romans understood gradient, water pressure, and distribution, creating systems that delivered millions of gallons daily. The water arrived at distribution tanks, then flowed through lead or clay pipes to public fountains and private homes. This infrastructure made Roman cities more livable than any before them, allowing populations to grow and sanitation to improve. Long after the empire fell, these aqueducts continued functioning, as some still carrying water to cities today, a lasting gift from engineers who died 2,000 years ago. Purple dye was worth more than gold. True purple dye came from a small gland in Murex sea snails. It took thousands of snails to produce a single ounce of dye, making it extraordinarily expensive, sometimes worth more than gold by weight. This Tyrian purple became so associated with wealth and power that emperors eventually restricted its use to the imperial family. Wearing purple without permission could be treason. The color symbolized ultimate status. When we say someone was born to the purple, meaning born into royalty, we're echoing Roman tradition. The dye industry centered in Phoenician cities, Tyre and Sidon, and the smell of rotting snails made dye works unbearable to neighbors, but the profit was worth the stench. Even now, purple retains associations with royalty and luxury, a cultural memory stretching back to Roman times, when wearing the right color could mark you as one of the most powerful people in the world. They had a goddess whose job was to protect doorways. Roman religion was deeply practical, with gods and goddesses overseeing every aspect of daily life. Cardia was the goddess of ductor hinges. Yes, specifically hinges, not doors in general. She protected homes from evil spirits that might enter and was especially invoked to protect children. Romans had hundreds of such specialized deities. Rabigus prevented wheat rust, Terminus guarded boundary stones, Cloacina watched over sewers. This wasn't abstract theology, but practical spirituality. You honored the God who governed whatever you were doing, ensuring success and avoiding divine displeasure. Before major events, Romans performed elaborate rituals to please relevant gods. Their religion was transactional, offerings in exchange for divine favor, and remarkably specific. In a world that felt dangerous and uncertain, having a deity for every occasion provided comfort. Someone was always watching, hopefully protecting, as long as you remembered to honor them properly. Roman toilets were public and social. Public latrines in Rome featured long benches with holes in them, arranged around 3 or 4 walls, where dozens of people could sit side by side and attend to business while chatting with neighbors. There was no privacy, no stalls, no toilet paper. Instead, a sponge on a stick, shared by all, sat in a channel of running water for cleaning. Wealthy homes had private toilets, but most Romans used these public facilities. They were social spaces, places to gossip and conduct business while answering nature's call. The running water beneath, fed by aqueducts, carried waste away to sewers. While strange to us, Romans saw nothing odd about it. Modesty was different then. The body's functions were natural, nothing to hide behind closed doors. These communal toilets show how different daily life was, how assumptions about privacy and propriety have changed over centuries. Julius Caesar was kidnapped by pirates and laughed at their ransom demand. In 75 BC, young Julius Caesar was captured by Cilician pirates who demanded 20 talents of silver for his release. Caesar laughed at the insult. He was worth far more than that. He insisted they raise the ransom to 50 talents, which they did. During his captivity, he treated the pirates with bemused contempt, telling them he'd return to crucify them all once freed. They thought he was joking. He wasn't. After 38 days, the ransom arrived, and Caesar was released. He immediately raised a fleet, captured the pirates, and had them crucified, though he mercifully had their throats cut first, as a concession to their relatively decent treatment of him. This story captures Caesar's character: proud, bold, capable of both ruthlessness and unexpected mercy. Even captured and helpless, he never doubted his destiny or his ability to reverse his fortunes. That unshakable confidence would carry him to the heights of Roman power. Romans ate dormice as a delicacy. Wealthy Romans considered dormice a delicacy, raising them in special jars called gleraria, fattening them on nuts and acorns. They'd be served stuffed, roasted, or cooked in various sauces as appetizers at fancy dinners. Recipe books from the time include multiple dormouse preparations. While this might seem strange, Romans ate many things we'd find odd: flamingo tongues, peacock, and garum, a fermented fish sauce that was absolutely everywhere in Roman cooking. Food wasn't just sustenance but status. Serving exotic dishes demonstrated wealth and sophistication. The poor ate porridge, bread, and simple vegetables. The rich displayed their success through elaborate feasts with rare ingredients. Romans judged each other partly by their tables, by what they could afford to serve guests. In this context, dormice weren't weirds. They were a way to say, "I've succeeded," without words, letting the meal speak for you. They held elections, but votes weren't always secret. The Roman Republic held regular elections for various offices, and citizens, free adult males, could vote. However, voting procedures changed over time. Initially, votes were public. You announced your choice aloud for all to hear, making it easy for powerful patrons to ensure clients voted correctly. Later, secret ballots on tablets were introduced, giving voters more freedom. But corruption remained rampant. Candidates bribed voters with money, food, and entertainment. They built patron-client networks where obligation, not political philosophy, determined votes. Elections could be violent, with rival factions literally fighting in the streets. Despite these flaws, Romans took voting seriously. Citizens who couldn't influence policy through wealth could still exercise power through ballots. When the Republic fell and emperors took absolute power, voting became mostly theatrical, maintaining the appearance of republican government while power rested with one man. The forms remained, but the substance had drained away. Pompeii was preserved under volcanic ash with graffiti still intact. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, it buried Pompeii and nearby towns under tons of ash and pumice, killing thousands but preserving a snapshot of Roman life. When archaeologists excavated centuries later, they found streets, homes, shops, and even graffiti scratched on walls. These casual messages are wonderfully human: declarations of love, political slogans, insults, advertisements for gladiatorial games, and yes, plenty of crude jokes and drawings. One reads, "I don't want to sell my husband, not for all the gold in the world," some another. Lucius painted this. The mundane preserved alongside the magnificent, a baker's shop with loaves still in the oven, a garden with plants identifiable by root casts, bodies frozen in their last moments. Pompeii gives us an unfiltered view of Roman life, not the idealized version from literature, but real people's real lives, their words still visible on walls after nearly 2,000 years. Roman concrete was stronger in seawater than on land. Modern concrete deteriorates in seawater, but Roman concrete actually gets stronger. The secret was volcanic ash that reacted with seawater to create aluminum tobermorite crystals, which made the concrete harder and more durable over centuries. Ancient Roman harbors remain intact, while modern concrete structures in seawater need constant repair. Scientists studying Roman concrete have only recently understood these chemical processes, hoping to recreate them for sustainable modern construction. The Romans didn't know the chemistry, but they knew volcanic ash from certain regions made superior marine concrete, so they used it. This practical knowledge, gained through experimentation and passed between generations, let them build structures that have outlasted the empire itself. It's a reminder that science doesn't require understanding mechanisms. Sometimes, knowing what works is enough. The Romans built to last, and 2,000 years later, their harbors still stand while ours crumble. Emperors could be declared gods after death. When an emperor died, the Senate could vote to deify him, making him officially a god of the Roman state. Temples would be built, priests appointed, and sacrifices made to his divine spirit. This wasn't mere flattery, but serious state religion. Augustus, the first emperor, was deified after death, setting a precedent. Not every emperor received this honor, only those the Senate deemed worthy. Some emperors, like Caligula, tried to have themselves worshipped as gods while still alive, which Romans found deeply disturbing. Deification served political purposes too. An emperor whose divine father watched from heaven had extra legitimacy. The line between mortal and God was permeable in Roman thought. Great men could ascend, joining the pantheon if their deeds warranted it. It was Rome's ultimate honor, transforming a human into something eternal, ensuring their memory and influence would never fade. Roman children played with toys surprisingly similar to ours. Archaeological finds show Roman children had dolls, toy soldiers, board games, balls, hoops, and toy animals. They played games like hide and seek, leapfrog, and knucklebones, similar to jacks. Dolls from wealthy families were articulated wooden figures with detailed clothing. Poorer children had simpler clay versions. Board games included dice and strategy games like Ludus Latrunculorum, similar to chess. Children kept pets, dogs, birds, even pet mice. They flew kites, played with tops, and rolled hoops with sticks. Despite the centuries separating us, children's play remains remarkably constant. The materials may change, but the impulse to pretend, compete, and explore through play is timeless. In Roman streets, children laughed, argued over game rules, and pestered parents for treats, just like today. This continuity across millennia reminds us that beneath the exotic details of ancient life, Romans were fundamentally human, raising children who played in ways instantly recognizable to any modern parent. They used lead pipes extensively, but probably weren't poisoned by them. Roman plumbing used lead pipes to carry water from aqueducts to homes and businesses. For years, historians speculated that lead poisoning from these pipes contributed to Rome's decline. Recent studies suggest this probably wasn't true. Roman water was hard, full of dissolved minerals that quickly coated pipe interiors, preventing lead from leaching into drinking water. Additionally, water moved constantly through the system, limiting exposure time. Romans did get lead poisoning, but primarily from lead-sweetened wine and lead cookware, not plumbing. Still, the Romans unknowingly created one of history's greatest public health systems. Their aqueducts, sewers, and public baths meant city dwellers had cleaner water and better sanitation than most humans would experience for the next 1,500 years. Roman cities could support huge populations, partly because they solved water supply and waste removal, even if they didn't fully understand the health implications. Gladiator fights were sometimes stopped if the combat was too boring. Not every gladiator fight was a dramatic battle to the death. Sometimes fighters were mismatched, both too defensive or simply not entertaining enough. In these cases, the editor, the official sponsoring the games, could stop the fight and declare a draw, or demand they fight more aggressively. Gladiatorial combat was entertainment first, execution distant second. The crowd wanted drama, skill, and courage, not just bloodshed. Fighters who showed these qualities, even in defeats, might earn the missio, a reprieve from death. The defeated gladiator would appeal to the crowd and editor, who'd judge whether he'd fought bravely enough to live. This wasn't random cruelty, but performance art, with deadly stakes. Good gladiators were expensive to train and maintain. Killing them wastefully made no economic sense. The best fights became famous, discussed in graffiti and poetry. Romans wanted spectacle, not senseless slaughter, though the line between them was thin and depended on the crowd's mood. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt. The Latin word salarium gives us our word salary, and it derived from sal, meaning salt. Roman soldiers received part of their pay as salt rations or money, specifically for buying salt. In the ancient world, salt was valuable. It preserved food, flavored bland grain porridges, and was essential for health. Controlling salt sources meant economic power. Roman roads facilitated salt trade from coastal areas to inland regions. The phrase, "worth his salt," comes from this Roman practice, meaning someone deserved their payment. While we take salt for granted, sprinkling it freely on food, Romans understood its value. Entire economies ran on salt trade routes. Wars were fought over salt sources. When we say someone earns their salt, we're echoing Roman economics, where this white crystal was valuable enough to pay the armies that conquered the world. They had a festival where social rules were reversed. During Saturnalia, a December festival honoring Saturn, normal social hierarchies were temporarily overturned. Slaves could speak freely to masters, might be served meals by them, and gambling, normally illegal, was permitted. People exchanged gifts, wore informal clothing, and elected a Lord of Misrule to preside over festivities. Schools closed, courts suspended operations, and everyone just had fun. This festival acknowledged that rigid social structures created tensions that needed periodic release. For a few days, the pressure valve opened, everyone relaxed, and the world turned upside down. Then, when Saturnalia ended, order was restored, and everyone returned to their proper places, perhaps more willing to accept the hierarchy after briefly escaping it. Saturnalia influenced later Christmas traditions, gift-giving, feasting, and seasonal celebration. When Romans converted to Christianity, familiar customs carried over, new meanings layered onto old celebrations. Another way Rome's legacy persisted long after the empire fell. Wealthy Romans hired readers to read aloud while they ate. Literacy rates were relatively low in Rome, but among the educated classes, literature was highly valued. Wealthy Romans kept slaves specifically trained to read aloud during meals, bathing, or leisure time. Dinner parties might feature poetry readings or philosophical discussions led by educated slaves. This wasn't background noise, but entertainment and education combined. Guests would discuss what was read, debating interpretations, and showing off their learning. Romans consumed literature socially. Silent reading was rare, even for personal study. Books were expensive scrolls, awkward to handle while eating. Having someone read aloud solved this problem while adding refinement to the meal. These reading slaves could become valued members of households, their education and pleasant voices making them more than just servants. For elite Romans, cultivating the mind mattered as much as feeding the body, and meals became opportunities for both. The Roman army built walls wherever they needed borders. Rome's frontiers were often marked by walls and fortifications. The most famous is Hadrian's Wall in northern England, stretching 73 miles coast to coast, marking the empire's northern boundary. But Romans built defensive walls across Europe, Africa, and Asia, anywhere they decided here the empire ends. These weren't just barriers, but statements. This is Rome. Beyond lies barbarian territory. Soldiers stationed along these walls maintained civilization's edge, guarding against raids while also taxing and controlling trade. Life on the frontier was hard, cold, and dangerous, far from Rome's comforts. Yet these soldiers held the line for generations, allowing civilization behind them to flourish. Many walls still exist, stone testimony to Roman determination to define and defend their world. When we see these ruins crossing landscapes, we're seeing the physical manifestation of empire, the literal edge of Roman power, beyond which lay the unknown. Romans recycled urine for industrial purposes. Rome had public urinals where passers-by could relieve themselves, and the collected urine was sold to fullers, laundry workers, and tanners. Urine's ammonia made it excellent for cleaning and softening cloth and for preparing leather. The Emperor Vespasian even taxed the urine trade. When his son Titus complained about taxing something so disgusting, Vespasian held up a gold coin and asked if it smelled bad. Pecunia non olet, money doesn't stink, became a famous saying. Romans were pragmatic, waste nothing, use everything. Their cities were industrial centers where every byproduct found use. This recycling mentality, born from necessity and reinforced by profit, made Roman cities more sustainable than they might otherwise have been. While we might find the specifics unpleasant, the principle of using everything, wasting nothing, sounds remarkably modern. Romans understood that sustainability wasn't just ethics, but economics. Chariot racing was more popular than gladiator fights. While gladiators get more attention today, Romans were absolutely obsessed with chariot racing. The Circus Maximus in Rome held 250,000 spectators, larger than any modern stadium, and races happened nearly daily. Fans supported teams identified by colors, blues, greens, reds, whites, with fanatical devotion bordering on modern sports mania. Riots broke out between rival factions. Successful charioteers became wealthy celebrities, their images on mosaics and pottery. Races were dangerous. Chariots crashed, horses trampled riders, and deaths were common. But champion racers could earn fortunes and retire as heroes. Racing appealed to all classes. Emperors and commoners attended together, making it the ultimate mass entertainment. The betting, the speed, the danger, and team loyalty created an atmosphere unmatched by any other Roman entertainment. When you imagine Rome, picture packed stadiums roaring as chariots thunder past, dust rising, wheels locking, crowds screaming for their colors. That was Rome's true passion. They practiced a form of surgery, including brain surgery. Roman medicine was surprisingly advanced. Physicians performed cataract surgery, amputations, cesarean sections, and even trepanation, drilling holes in skulls to relieve pressure. They understood that gladiators' wounds provided learning opportunities, studying injuries to understand anatomy. Doctors used opium and alcohol as anesthetics, though surgery remained agonizing. Surgical instruments from Roman sites show sophisticated designs: scalpels, forceps, catheters, and bone drills that wouldn't look too out of place in a modern medical museum. Military surgeons were especially skilled, treating battlefield injuries regularly. Not all patients survived, and infection killed many post-surgery, but Roman medicine was far ahead of what came after the empire fell. For centuries following Rome's collapse, medical knowledge regressed. It wasn't until the Renaissance that European medicine regained what Romans knew. When you needed surgery in 200 AD Rome, your chances were probably better than they'd be for the next 1,000 years. Roman engineers built heated floors in bathhouses using steam and hot air. Public baths were central to Roman life, and the Hippocaust heating system kept them comfortable year-round. Hot air from furnaces circulated beneath floors and through wall cavities, warming rooms to different temperatures. Baths typically had a frigidarium, cold room, tepidarium, warm room, and caldarium, hot room, plus separate areas for exercise and socializing. Admission was cheap or free, making baths accessible to all classes. Romans bathed daily if possible, treating baths as social centers where they exercised, conducted business, gossiped, and relaxed. Some bathhouses could accommodate thousands. The ruins of the baths of Caracalla in Rome still impress with their vast halls and sophisticated engineering. For a few coins, ordinary Romans accessed facilities that rivaled modern spas, enjoying warm water, heated floors, and even swimming pools. Long after the empire fell, many bathhouses continued operating, maintained by populations who remembered Rome's gift of communal comfort. And so our journey through ancient Rome comes to its quiet end. We've walked through streets that disappeared centuries ago, listened to languages that evolved into the ones we speak today, and glimpsed lives that feel both utterly foreign and strangely familiar. Rome was contradiction, brutal yet sophisticated, practical yet artistic, tolerant yet rigid. It gave us roads and law, aqueducts and literature, a legacy so deep we barely notice it anymore because it's simply part of how the world works. The Romans themselves would be amazed to know we still talk about them, still study their language, still walk past their ruins and wonder at what they built. They hoped to last forever, and in a way they did, not as an empire but as an influence, a foundation upon which so much else was constructed. As you drift towards sleep tonight, perhaps you can picture a Roman street at dusk, oil lamps being lit in windows, vendors packing up their stalls, families gathering for evening meals. Or maybe you'll imagine the Forum in its glory, marble gleaming, senators in togas arguing about matters that seemed urgent then but are footnotes now. Or perhaps just one person, us, a baker or a soldier, a mother or a merchant, living their ordinary life in extraordinary times, never knowing they'd become history. If you enjoyed this gentle exploration of the past, feel free to like and subscribe, or share your thoughts in the comments. It helps others find these calm journeys too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, there's nothing more you need to do. Rome has had its say, its story told once more, its echoes fading into the peaceful quiet of your mind. Rest well and remember, empires rise and fall, but the human spirit that built them, loved, hoped, and dreamed within them, that remains eternal. Good night.